Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for our second insight session of the Social Purpose Institute. We do encourage you to share in chat where you are signing on from, where you are today. I've seen people from as far away as Paris, where it's they probably sitting there with a glass of wine, right through to Edmonton and Powell River and all parts in between. So truly enabled by being able to go virtual. We're delighted to have such a broad group of people join us here today. As I said, this is our second insight session at the Social Purpose Institute. We call them such because what we are doing with these sessions is really exploring the complexity of social purpose. And we're recruiting visionaries such as we have today, leaders, front runners in the social purpose business movement to share with us their insights on exploring and experimenting and innovating in aspects of the business model as they bring their social purpose to life. The first session we had was on aligning a company's corporate social responsibility and a company's corporate sustainability initiatives with their social purpose. And this session today is really to look at what is the role of marketing in a purpose-led brand, because we think there's something very unique and special going on, and we're delighted to have some panelists to help us really explore that question so you can bring that insight to your own organization. Now, feel free to share comments in the chat, which unfortunately I won't be moderating, but if you have questions of the panel, please put them into the Q&A function and I'll be able to keep track of those. And we're planning to have our Q&A period near the end of the session, as you would be very familiar with that model. So I would like to now introduce these visionaries that we've been telling you about. First up, we have Anne Donahoe, and she is a global marketing executive with a career building purpose-driven brands. She's had 25 years of experience in marketing, including most recently the Chief Marketing Officer at Mountain Equipment Co-op, where she was for 6 years until, notably, take note of this date, until 2019. For those of you who are familiar with the MEC story in Canada. She is currently consulting and exploring new ventures in her current role. We also then have Chris Peacock. He is the, I'm going to call him quirky. Do you mind that, Chris? He's the quirky and fun Chief Marketing Officer at Traction on Demand. He also has over 20 or nearly 20 years of marketing experience, and his company went through the Social Purpose Institute to develop its social purpose. He might say something about that. Now, of course, Peter, I've already called Chris quirky. And so I'm going to save a special word for you, which is frolicky. How about that? And you will all find how much fun Peter brings to any undertaking at all. And I'm happy that he is bringing his fun and insights to his role of Chief Social Purpose Officer at the at BC Lotteries Corporation, where I might add, I'm also on the board of directors. So I disclose that in case you find that I'm giving Peter all the best questions, then you could put that into perspective about why that perhaps might be so. So with that, maybe I should just say a word about myself. I am an advisor to the Social Purpose Institute and have been with the organization since it was founded 4 years ago. And the Social Purpose Institute has a mission to change business for good. It offers support and programs to business leaders that would like to refine or unearth or define their social purpose as the reason they exist. And they also have programs to help businesses implement their social purpose into everything that they do. So I've been helping the Social Purpose Institute with those programs, and they are scaling them out through the United Way movement. I'm very excited to be part of this organization, which is really endeavoring to kickstart a purpose-driven economy. And you heard it here first. But happy to have you join us in the ambition. I'll say more about that later. So without much further ado, we will get going with our panelists. here. Give us all a wave just so here, okay, you real people. Yeah, we're all good to go. Okay, so first then, we thought as a group we should situate this whole conversation in light of how marketing is changing. Because anyways, marketing is changing. Nothing stands still. So Peter, if you could kick this off by like, how is marketing changing and what are you seeing? And how do these trends in marketing position purpose-based marketing? So if you could kick us off. You might be on mute because I can't hear you. Oh.
Sorry.
There
I got
go.
this. I got a double mute thing going on.
It's a double mute thing. Okay.
Yeah, which is actually in most people's interests. In any event, so I've worked both client side and company or consultant side, and actually I used to work at MEC as well back in the day. And what I can say is that the advertising industry has really been turned on its head in the last 10 years. That the traditional agency model is under pressure as companies are taking marketing more and more in-house, in part to better manage digital, and are seeking specialist firms for key skills that they need. So, the old days where you sort of had one advertising agency of record and they did everything for you is gone the way of the dodo bird. As an example, DDB used to have 200 employees in Vancouver. It's down to 25. And all the multinationals have really left Vancouver, except for Taxi and Cassette, which ironically are both Canadian but are now foreign owned. In terms of what's happened, 2020, I think everybody can agree is like this bizarre year, and COVID has changed the perspective, I think, for a lot of companies as well as consumers. We've moved from the personal, I think, to the collective. This whole notion of we're in this together and we have to work together to address this pandemic, I think is a significant shift. British Columbians in particular, we've done some, we constantly do research at BCLC, but of late we did some research which revealed that British Columbians perceive themselves more in tune with societal or social issues than ever before. And so issues like racism and the Black Lives Matter movement, or social inequality and discrimination, the pandemic, mental health issues. These are all, personal well-being. These are all top of mind with everybody because I think all of us have experienced different aspects of this in our own personal lives. And at the same time, consumers are seeking stronger connections to brands, and the ones that show authentically and that they care are being rewarded. People are also, because they're more aware of social issues, they're more opinionated, and when talking about who is responsible for addressing these issues, and companies play a significant role in that perception. There's also been some deterioration of trust amongst public entities, so folks are looking to, who's going to help us get out of this mess that we're in. So all of these forces, I think, have played a significant role in terms of marketing, and has risen purpose to the surface as one way to help address these various trends.
Thank you for kicking us off, Peter, and setting the table around British Columbians, but those even beyond are more in tune with societal issues. They're seeking stronger connections to the brand and marketing going in-house. So companies now are more executing directly on their marketing program. So some very powerful trends at hand. Chris, over to you. What would you add to this view of how marketing's changing and how that's starting to position purpose marketing and bringing it to the fore?
Yeah, the one thing I would add, Coral, and Peter kind of mentioned it, the advertising world's being turned on its head, but and it's based on the consumer and the person buying, and that's B2B or B2C. I think it started with people looking at product and price, and then that became table stakes when that all evened out or came close to each other. Then it was customer service and speed and availability. And now it's around values and purpose. And people are voting with their dollars. They're putting their whether it's their own dollars for a sweatshirt or a hoodie or a cup of coffee, or a massive multi-million-dollar contract. The buyer is looking at the brands behind the product or service, and they're going even one level deeper, that they're looking at the people behind the brands, behind the product and service. So now with social, with Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn, there's no one who buys in a B2B transaction that doesn't know more about the person they're talking to on the other end of the line than they ever did before.
All right, so building on Peter's observations, we're adding in the shift from a focus on price and product to convenience and speed, now to values and purpose. And this idea that people know the other people at the other end of the line, and that this ability to make these human connections is there front and center, whether it's B2B, business to business, or a B2C, business to consumer. Very profound. And I know you've got more to add to that. What adds would you make to these trends in marketing and how it's elevating purpose?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, consumers have also shortened attention spans. I think back to when I started marketing a long time ago, that I was building out complex direct mail packages with 4-page letters. And, now consumers have so many sources of information. There's so many places that they can go to find products. And you find that in the retail industry. When you're selling products, people can buy this very similar product next door. And so, we get caught up, and now it's Black Friday coming up and everyone's thinking about discounts. And marketers just want to get people through the funnel and to a purchase. But I think, if I can quote Simon Sinek, that people are not necessarily buying what you do, but why you do it. And purpose really provides that why. And purpose marketing provides that heart. And as you talked about, that connection with the consumer, which I think really enables an organization to differentiate itself amongst a whole whack of clutter.
So altogether, whether driven by COVID or changing consumer preferences, by technology, so much is driving interest on the part of consumers to really understand the value proposition behind the brand. So we're now going to turn our attention to looking on the inside of the company. How does it actually look, given those sort of external pressures and forces? What is the role of marketing in a social purpose company? And here I kind of want to understand, how does it differ from a conventional company? Like a conventional company was run a certain way in terms of marketing, maybe with these advertising agencies, Peter, and then how does it change? And how is it different and unique in a purpose-driven company? And I'm going to start with you, Chris. Can you just say a word about who Traction on Demand is and its social purpose, just briefly? And then for you, how does marketing differ?
Okay. So Traction on Demand, we're a professional services organization founded in 2007. We do implementations, integration, and application development on the Salesforce platform. We've also spun out 5, soon to be 6 SaaS product companies. And we're close to 1,000 people, 70% of those people in Canada, but 70% of our business coming from outside of Canada. So we say we export services and import cash into the country. And we're a best place to work 6 years in a row, best managed, and most proudly a B Corp. So then to answer the question, Cora, which is how it differs.
What's your social purpose?
Our social purpose that we spent a year kind of, I'll say articulating. It wasn't about finding purpose, because purpose is something that you always feel in an organization, but really clearly defining it. And where we landed was waste no potential. To your question about marketing in a purpose-driven company, I think, as I said, I think all companies have purpose. Many of them just haven't been clearly articulated, or in a lot of cases, the lines will be grayed between a mission and a purpose. But oftentimes, it's not necessarily tied to society or I'll say responsibility. And when I say responsibility, it's if you're a successful business, or a successful individual, it's almost your duty or your responsibility to have a positive impact on society. So that said, marketing for an organization that it has a strong social purpose and a strong sense of that responsibility, it's a lot easier. And I'll say it's a lot easier because, to Peter's point, you can be authentic. You're not trying to craft a story or craft a veil of authenticity. And instead of advertisers, we become storytellers. So it's, if it's truly felt, it's in the organization, it's something that's felt in a product, in the customer community, in your service, the way you deliver. It makes our jobs as marketers a lot easier, and I'll say a lot more fun, because ultimately what we're doing is telling and sharing our story.
Wow. So not trying to create a veil of authenticity, working very hard to sort of patch up some holes or cover them or create something that doesn't exist. Instead, becoming storytellers of your purpose. So that is a very significant shift between these different approaches to marketing within a social purpose company. And now, Peter, over to you. How is BC Lotteries Corporation approaching its social purpose? And how are you wrapping your mind around social purpose there from a marketing perspective?
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, for those who aren't aware, BCLC, our name's a bit of a misnomer because we oversee more than lotteries. Our role is to run responsibly all gambling-related activities in the province, and then to deliver a significant dividend from these activities. Last year, that was $1.4 billion. We were the largest non-tax source of revenue to the province. At the same time, though, interestingly enough, when I took this role, people are like, social purpose and gambling, like, how does that fit? So there's a certain perception that people have of the company, but we are a leader in player health, so in protecting people from engaging in gambling activities that might be harmful to them or the people that they love. And there's lots of definitions of what a social purpose company is, but you'll be pleased to know, Coral, that we use the one put forward by the Social Purpose Institute, which is that a social purpose company is one whose enduring reason for being is a better world, and that its growth is a positive source in society. So we're still refining our social purpose, though we've done a very extensive process, and I'll speak to that in a moment, and we expect to have sign-off from our board in January. But we're focused in uncovering that social purpose at the intersection of what the world needs, what's important to people, and what we uniquely offer as a company, including our origin story. So what I can say is that we've undertaken a comprehensive process that's included the development of a BCLC-focused social purpose primer, because we wanted to ensure that when we were engaging with our various stakeholders, that everybody knew what we meant by social purpose, that they had a better understanding of who the company was and what some of the other examples of leading social purpose companies are. We've conducted several interviews with the board, the executives, subject matter experts, public opinion research. We've engaged employees. We've had 7 different stakeholder workshops. We've created a social purpose task team, and we've trained more than 15 employees internally to be social purpose ambassadors. So we've done a lot of activities, and that's been validated by a variety of folks that we really have taken we've undertaken a really comprehensive process. In terms of marketing and where we're going with and where we are going with this, number one is you've got to start with your employees and ensuring an understanding of your social purpose and how that applies to their work. And that relates to the old what's in it for me kind of issue, and engaging with them on ways that they can incorporate that social purpose. First of all, understanding what that social purpose is, and then how does that relate to their areas of responsibility, and spend more time than you think is necessary on building that internal understanding and alignment. Because the worst thing that can happen, and I've had that with a few social purpose companies where I've talked to their employees and I've asked them and they're like, I don't know, and that just does not, that rings hollow. And then from that strong internal base where employees understand what it means and how it relates to their areas of responsibility, then you can start to cascade it out to key stakeholders. And leading social purpose companies really excel at stakeholder engagement, and that's why we've put those two functions together within the organization. We have a director of social purpose and stakeholder engagement who reports to me, and we feel really strongly that those two things go together. And then marketing activities really come third from that. And from that perspective, social purpose is about communicating that your brand has meaning, to invite your customers to join your movement, and to ensure that marketing is viewed broadly. It's not just in the marketing department anymore. Everything you do and say as a company is part of the marketing of your social purpose.
Wow. Everything you do and say is part of your marketing effectively. So you have a social purpose, you mobilize your employees around it so that they're embedding it in everything they do and they understand what their role is. And then everything you do, I guess to match that to what Chris was saying, everything you do tells your story. Chris was saying it's about storytelling. So everything
Absolutely.
anybody does, and even so with your stakeholders, I guess, is telling your story. So that's,
I like
go ahead.
I like the point Peter made about how, and this was the same thing with brand. If you do a brand evolution or a rebrand of an organization, you need to start internally and create those ambassadors. And to your point, I love that, the cascading of that. And you need to start with your key ambassadors, which is your own team, and make sure everyone's on board. It's the same thing as adoption of anything. You need to start from the core and work your way up.
Mm-hmm. All right, Anne, what about you? You've advised brands and you've worked in a social purpose company. So how do you see marketing differentiating in a social purpose company?
I think it does start with the leadership team and their perspective of the organization. And so what I found is that it's broader. It's thinking about, of course, how do we drive profits, the financial health of the organization? How do we acquire more customers and satisfy our customers? But there's the social impact side as well. And the ideal situation is when all three are interconnected and you have the KPIs and measurements in place, because that's also drives the culture and ensuring that we're all thinking about this. So when it cascades to the various functions and within the organization, I think from a marketing side, it has a much more strategic role at the table, because marketing is the voice of the customer and bringing that forth and in that engagement of the customer. But also, if you think functionally of what marketing does, I've worked in the ski resort and travel business, and that's all about creating experiences and memories. But the difference that I saw, say, at an MEC, is that the content and the engagements are about the whole person and the fuller experience and the impact that you can have on their life. So to Chris's point, it is around that storytelling, but it's much more holistic than you would say if I was selling a ski vacation. It's also around the types of partnerships that you engage, because as a social purpose organization, you need to build an ecosystem, that it's not just you that is going to achieve your goals. And so how you approach partnerships is different. It's from a shared value, shared purpose, and it's a deeper relationship as a result. And then third, I would say it's how you engage in dialogue. When you take a stand on issues, you're able to go deep and have more meaningful conversations and amplify that out. And for instance, I was talking to a CMO from a large global social purpose organization, and she said, we spend a lot less money on advertising than our competitors, because when we communicate about the issues and take a stand, that gets amplified through our community and through media. But I completely agree with what Chris and Peter were talking about, where it's at the heart of it all is the staff, because what I also have seen is that the passion for the purpose comes through in terms of all the communications, and customers feel that and they can't help but get excited as well.
So just a couple things to knit together here. This idea that you spend less on advertising because you're getting earned media and you're getting word of mouth. presumably from these stances you would take, but also if everything your employees do tells your story, just by executing on your business, your marketing, so you don't actually need a marketing budget for that, you just need to embed it in everything the employees are doing. So it's just a new way of looking at the marketing resources. Now your employees are part of that.
Absolutely. And if you think of, for instance, as MEC, of their success as being through all the touch points that you have with their staff in the stores, that really creates that whole brand feel, and the brand, it drives the brand equity.
And then this idea of partnerships you talked about social purpose companies having partnerships, building out their ecosystem to help them implement on their social purpose. So your partnerships become now an extension of your marketing. And just to knit that back to what Peter was saying about stakeholder engagement as partners on your purpose. And so then they become part of telling your story as well, back to Chris's point about storytelling. So you can see there's a lot of new levers for marketing in this once the social purpose has been defined. And so that, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing to that. You know, what's really important, I think, in this conversation as well is the idea of reciprocity, because we can't achieve our social purpose with our stakeholders, but it can't be a one-way street where we suck all the energy into our organization or whatever organization we work for. We also need to be prepared to support other organizations in their social purpose. And traditionally, marketing has not been about reciprocity. It's been more of a one-way street. And so I think that's also partially you know, a signal of the shift that's happening in marketing, that it's moving more from monologue to dialogue, and from sort of benevolence to reciprocity.
So I hope somebody tweeted that, is shifting from monologue to dialogue in the social purpose space. That is a very tweetable quote there, Peter.
Thank you. I just made that up.
All right, so I now have 2 questions I'm going to give to all of you, and choose one or the other or speak to both. What we would like to hear from you next is, so how do you actually either engage or activate your customers? And Anne, I'm going to ask you to start. How do you activate and engage your customers in helping you achieve your social purpose? Like, is there a new role for customers rather than just recipients of your marketing, but to co-create your purpose, if you will? And how do you move from engaging your customers to creating a movement around your brand? If you do you see that as a future scope for marketing? 2 questions. You can speak to them both or lean in on one, Anne, starting with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, you know, I'll lean on the MEC example as well here, in that community was a core pillar of the brand. And, you know, bringing together events and races and partnerships and community grants, all of that into one program, and then amplifying that out through all the individual product campaigns to be able to give people opportunities to engage and bring people together was a huge part of the marketing success there and the brand success. I think from a Canadian perspective, we're often humble and quiet about what we do. And to be able to really create some noise and get people behind something, it's maybe not necessarily in our nature as much, but I think, you know, where I've seen the engagement tip into movement is when you take a stronger stand on an issue. And certainly had experience with that when we took a stand on diversity and inclusion a few years back. And that movement starts to the earlier points internally. It's about conversations that start happening, diverse shared experiences that are circulating around the organization, not just within marketing. And when you build on those and then you bring in the community partners, that's when the magic happens. And then it builds and builds, and then you start engaging customers in the conversation. And so by having, for instance, a cause marketing campaign that takes a stronger stand on an issue, it can then get amplified and you create dialogue. And I've seen firsthand the impact of that dialogue. It's not just about impressions. It is around having people feel like they've been seen, they've been heard, that they're in the conversation, and that is incredibly powerful. And it's an opportunity to bring more people into your community that never would have considered you prior. So I think it's a very powerful thing, but you can't sustain that ongoing. So it's being strategic in terms of when you start amplifying that and when you go deep.
So social purpose companies looking at their customers in such a way that they bring them together. And basically that's a new value proposition. Not only you buy my products and services, but I create a community that you can join and participate in. It's one way of activating, and then another through taking stands on your social purpose or aspects of your social purpose, then your customers creating platforms for them to be heard and to have a voice in that. And so again, another value proposition, I would argue, something else that you're offering into the customer market space that you can add that would differentiate you from your customers, I'm hearing. All right, Chris, Peter, who wants to be the fast follow-on ad?
I'll go.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I think one thing that Anne spoke to, is this idea of quality over quantity. And as marketers, we often get obsessed with, what's our CPM, or how many people did we reach, and so on and so on. And at the end of the day, that's a very blunt, measurement, because, okay, so I reached these people. Did they absorb the message? Did it resonate with them? Did they act on it? These are important things, right? So I think Anne's comment, it really speaks to this idea of quality over quantity. A few points that I just want to add to this conversation around, how do you engage and activate your customers, and how do you move this into more of a movement? Number one, I think you have to also demonstrate how is this social purpose relevant to your customers, their values, and the various need states that they may have. So, using your segmentation models to inform this, like there still is rigor in how we can approach this, and so let's not forget that. And there's a variety of tools that we have as marketers in order to do that. But we don't want to challenge people about who they are or who they think they are. We want to connect with them and show them how we can provide a bridge between where they are and who we are, and how together we're better, as it were. I think the other thing is being really responsible to their feedback, and creating various opportunities for them to provide that input, and then sharing how you've reflected that input back to them is really critical, because nobody wants to give input into a vacuum and never hear back. I think the other thing that's really important is giving them tools. And so with social media, memes and other things, badges, you name it, so that it can help tell the story to their networks. That's part of this idea of, word of mouth doesn't just happen organically. Like, we can help engineer that, like an overnight sensation takes years to create, but we can help advance that. And I think providing recognition and using even gamification principles. We've engaged a guy named Gabe Zickerman, who is like, he's a Canadian. He lives in Los Angeles now, but he's kind of like the father of the idea of gamification. He's written books about it and so on. Of course, we're in the gaming industry, so that idea of gamification principles is really near and dear to our hearts. So also finding ways to bring your movement to life with ways that are relevant to who you are as a company and what your roots are, I think is really important as well. Traction on Demand, being a Salesforce company, has a variety of tools that they can use to do and I'm sure that they are, to do the same thing, right? Maybe it's a different expression, but still that idea of recognition and gamification and giving people that opportunity to feel like their contribution to your social purpose is valued is really, really critical.
So going deeper again into the customer experience and tapping into their motivations and using tools like gamification and other technologies basically to help mobilize a movement around your brand aligned to your social purpose. And Peter, you gave a whole list of different techniques that could be used to enable that kind of undertaking. Chris, could you bring home and finalize this question around how to activate or engage your customers on your purpose and or how to create a movement around your brand. I understand you just had a very successful national mobilization yesterday, but what's been your experience and what can you share to help others on this path?
Yeah, again, I think the creating a movement, there are a couple like points that we're bang on. You need to find people with shared values who understand and resonate your purpose resonates with them. You need to have an opinion. It's what like this one was actually one that Shiza Shahid said, where anyone can be a great marketer. Although I might just disagree with that one, but to be truly successful, you need to have an opinion, and you need to share that opinion, and you need to be willing to take the risk to share that opinion. And you made a good point about saving dollars on advertising if you have a good story to tell. Patagonia, who's a customer and a fellow B Corp, is a perfect example of that. They spend 1% of their revenue on advertising, which
they were the ones I was talking about.
Yeah, in that space, that's nothing. But that said, they also make some risky. They put their opinions out there, and some risky opinions that they know is probably going to send a certain type of buyer away from their brand and bring a certain type of buyer even closer. And they're willing to decide on that. Now, for us, we're a B2B organization, which is a very different game, but it's kind of not now, because we say that we live by that whole saying, people buy and companies pay. And at the end of the day, we're all B2P. We're all businesses selling to people. And you need to assume that people are buying with their hearts, their mind, and purpose, and lead with that. And then the fact is, if they're not receptive, you can fall back on your product and your service and your competitive differentiators. But I think nowadays you really have to assume that that's the case. But you're also not going to win or lose the deal on purpose alone. You still need to have the product. You still need to have the quality, the service, and do it. So you have to weave purpose into what you do or what you sell or what you build or what you offer, in the same way that you need to weave what you sell and what you offer and what you do into your purpose.
So I would think in the past, even sort of ethically branded companies and others, they would have led with the basics and said, oh, and here's my ethical value add.
Yeah.
And now you're saying we're seeing a switch in that on purpose-driven marketers, where they're saying lead with their values, lead with their purpose, and fall back on the basics. So we're really putting the whole sort of frame on its head, or upending it, you would say. And I notice a tweetable point. We're not B2B, we're not B2C, we're B2P, business to people. And I think that's a very profound point that you've made for marketers to unpack, and especially if you're in the B2B space, and really start to understand what those dynamics are. Now, it wouldn't be right of us just to talk about the upside of purpose marketing without talking about the downside of purpose marketing. There are some risks. There are pitfalls, and there are challenges, especially because this is a new frontier of marketing. We're experimenting, we're innovating, what works, what doesn't, failing fast, hopefully. But what are some pitfalls and challenges? Peter, I'm going to have you start. And can you share with us your thoughts on how a firm might avoid purpose washing?
Yeah.
What is it? And then how to avoid it?
Purpose washing is basically, bullshitting. It's about presenting yourself as being something that you're not. Now, I think we all know from personal experience, we sometimes like to, present our best selves or inflate perhaps some of our achievements as part of an interview or something like that. So that's kind of human nature to do that. But, in this day and age where there's a number of watchdogs where, I think another important point to make is that social media, which is a double-edged sword for good and for bad, has really democratized to a large degree the ability for citizens and watchdogs and other groups to call the bullshit where they see it. And so it's really important to be aware of that and to be authentic, because if you're not, it's going to get called out sooner rather than later. And it's okay to be aspirational, because that's what a social purpose is about. It's about a future state that you hope to achieve. But don't forget that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So you have to ensure that your own employees understand and believe in that social purpose, and you have to focus deeply on that stakeholder engagement piece. And if I was going to, reassign some of my effort or budget, it would be into that stakeholder engagement piece, because it's important to understand how they view you, understand those values that Chris spoke to as well. And values are touchy, right? Because we have seen that in a variety in the U.S. election and various other places, that people don't want to feel like their values are under attack. We have to find ways of showing how their values can be represented in our social purpose. Because if we don't do that, it's okay to take positions like, Nike took the whole Colin Kaepernick thing, which did turn off some people. And just to speak to Patagonia, they wrote something like, they had a little tab in some of their clothing that said, "Vote the assholes out," just leading up to this recent election, which is pretty, aggressive on their part. So, it's okay to have an opinion, but at the same time, you have to be clear about, well, who is my constituency, and that there is a range of values across them, and you want to find different ways of expressing how that social purpose helps to validate and also advance their values. And that stakeholder engagement piece that I talked about is super critical. And I think the other thing is, in the past, brands viewed their role, it was very much protective, right? We own the brand. We will, you look at I worked on the 2010 Olympics, and like that ownership over the brand and sponsors and so on was like incredible. You don't own your brand anymore. Your customers own the brand, your stakeholders own the brand, and that idea of giving that away, that ownership away to them, is something that I think companies have to get really comfortable with. And if you do that, you will avoid some of that purpose washing. Because if you try to control every message and every action and every implication associated with your social purpose, you'll be dead in the water. So it's really important to get that comfort level that we've done good stakeholder engagement. We know that our social purpose is valid and resonant, that it's rooted in what people want and what the world needs and what we're good at, as I mentioned earlier. And then at that point in time, you don't really own it anymore. It's up to the communities that you interact with to determine whether or not they hold value in that. And there's lots of great examples of companies that have done it right, and there's examples of companies that have done it wrong. I think some of the points that we've talked about in this session today hopefully will give people a sense of how you do that correctly. But if you think that you can kind of like come up with a social purpose, control it, and move it through your various audiences in a way that continues to maintain that control, then that's where you fall into that purpose washing trap.
So have your eye on your stakeholders. Mobilize your stakeholders on your social purpose, which you have to do anyways because you can't achieve your purpose on your own. So have goals and intentions around that. Share your purpose, have it be reciprocal, and then recognize that you don't own your brand. And then you've got partners in building your brand, and they hold you accountable. And if you're that well enmeshed and engaged with your stakeholders, you've got to, right away, you're hearing what their reaction is to your purpose. And so you could pivot if you need be to avoid accusations of purpose washing. Very, very thoughtful there. So our next pitfall I'm going to assign to you, Chris, and this is a different challenge that marketers can face, which is to say, do you find that some customers are more receptive than others to purpose value propositions? And if so, how do you address this? So if you're a social purpose company, you're leading with your social purpose, it's infiltrated into your marketing, and yet some customers are not receptive to that. So what do you do in that instance?
Yeah, I think this is so the first thing I would say is again, you lead with it, and if they're not receptive to it, well, it's very rarely going to be a downfall. And then you move on to your other kind of value props or your differentiators. But at the same time, you can't be friends with everyone. And I'm going to go back to the Yvon Chouinard and the Patagonia story, where when they create a product, they just decided like our product's going to be for taller, skinnier people and mountain climbers when they started producing. And they're like, we have to pick a lane and go down it and build that. Of course, they've grown way beyond that, but you have to be willing to say no. You have to be willing to alienate some groups that aren't going to have aligned values, and hopefully your values are ones that are totally in line with your addressable market and like all the I'll say the true marketing speak around that. But the thing is, if you are truly a purpose-driven organization, I believe that purpose is built off of values. Values is an organization thing. It's a collection thing. It's a collection of all the people in the organization. And if you stay true to them, and again, you don't have to ram your purpose down someone's throat, especially we're in a B2B space. And if our customers are like, you know what, that's awesome, I'm glad you guys do that, but whatever, let's get this price down, or how can you do this faster? Well, we have to address that if we want to get that deal and we want to win that client. But sometimes you have to be willing to say no, or have to be willing to walk away from some customers that aren't receptive to it.
And I would even so imagine that the customer that comes in because they want the price and the quality, convenience, you could migrate them over time to become an ally on your purpose. And you might even want to set targets against that. I don't know. Do you want to say something about that?
Well, totally. I think the whole thing with price, and now with customers have done the research before, and again, that's B2B or B2C. They know what price they can get everywhere. They've looked at, like, yes, they have the ability to do what I need them to do. So I might have an opportunity to negotiate a bit on price, but all that becomes almost standardized. So then you have to figure out what your differentiators are to then win that customer over. And this is one that, like, we're willing to invest in and say, like, this is our differentiator is going to be not the fact that we have values, because everyone has values, but that we're willing to put them all out on the table and say, like, yeah, this is exactly who we are. This is a collection of people behind our products and our services. Does this resonate with you? And do we want to be, and to Anne's point, do we want to be partners in this? Like, even if I'm just selling you a transactional item, we're still partners. You are now an ambassador. You're wearing my product. You're wearing my brand. You're working with us from a service standpoint. And there's almost a qualification point on both sides of the fence. We need to qualify our customers as much as they need to qualify us as vendors or suppliers.
Very interesting. All right, Anne, I'm going to give you sort of the third pitfall that we have identified, put you on the hot seat on this one. Would you say are there times when purpose should or can be left out of the customer conversation, where you're just actually not speaking to it at all? And when and why would you do that, or would you do that if you're a purpose-driven company?
Yeah, I think of, we talked earlier around when social purpose is truly embedded into your organization, it flows through everything that you do. And so an example is, say, Lego. Lego, they're trying to develop builders of the future. They believe in the power of play for learning. And so that comes through when they're talking about their product. It's just inherent, like it's just built into the language, the authentic language of the product. And certainly they'll have programs that kind of amplify that purpose. But, it comes down to understanding, even if you don't have it so well interconnected, understanding, to Chris's point, the customer's journey and how they're making decisions. And at what point they need what type of information, whether it's to inspire them or motivate them or feel good about their purchase, or if they're just in the store and they're looking at the attributes of the product and they're buying a Patagonia jacket, say on Altitude Sports website, and trying to look at the technical attributes of it and the pricing and make a decision. That's when you pull Patagonia language would be pulling back on the sustainability side. So it really comes back to understanding your customer and what they absolutely need at certain times within that decision-making process, and versus where you, as amazing points where you can bring in that social purpose message and really connect with people.
So timing is critical as ever, and to be alert about the customer life cycle and all the touch points and see how you can activate in the space to bring them along. All right, I'm going to now turn to some questions from our team here. And I'm going to have Peter answer the first question. And with an eye on the clock, Peter, maybe kind of like a 1-minute answer so we can get to, you know, as many questions as possible. So this is about this is about ambassadors. This is about external ambassadors. You know, I guess your stakeholders, but the ambassadors that you've built in your stakeholder constituencies. So rather than you sharing your social purpose story, rather than BC Lottery sharing its social purpose story, how do you empower your ambassadors / stakeholders to share your story for you? How would you approach that?
Well, I think we talked a bit about that earlier, but what's really critical is, first of all, to create a community of those people, to bring them together, to allow them to hear from one another, and to equip them with tools and support in order to help tell that story, would be my most succinct answer to that question.
Okay. And a very important part of the process is to be thinking about how to mobilize your stakeholders or your ambassadors, to think of your stakeholders as future ambassadors and equip them. All right.
Absolutely.
So Anne, this next question is for you. The strongest purpose-driven brands seem to be the brands where their purpose is their positioning. Do you think these two things can be separate, where the brand positioning is in any way separate from the purpose? And how do you see these two things coming together?
I do think that from an authenticity side and the ease of being able to market it, to communicate it, to avoid, you know, the purpose washing when you have it all integrated. I think, you know, versus, for instance, to the extreme, having a CSR program that's on the side, you know, it's really that from a communication side and the ability to engage and be really authentic across every single touch point with the customer. I think having them woven together tightly is incredibly important.
All right. Any fast follows, Chris, Peter?
I agree 100%. You can't separate those two things.
Yeah, that whole idea of integrating it in, and there's a term called corporate social integration, rather than corporate social responsibility, where an organization, if it just has a group that's responsible for, hey, you're our carbon credit in this, or you're our social credit in this, make sure everything that we're doing you're counterbalancing. It doesn't work the same as if you actually weave that into supply chain and services and HR and every aspect of your business. It's just going to be way more powerful.
So Chris, I'm going to stick with you to answer the next question. In fact, it's directed at you. You said that people are going one level deeper and looking at the people behind the brand. Do you have examples of businesses or marketing who have told the story of their people in an interesting or new way? I mean, just to stick with your line of thought on that, therefore you must be marketing the story of your people in a way, if it's the people behind the brand. So can you explore that a little bit? What might that look like? Do you have examples?
No, I love that one. And it's a fine line, right? Like you can be opportunistic and shove your people out there. I'd say one example, and I think you default within that question, it's like you default to the people in the organization who work for the organization, but it's not necessarily that. It could be customers, right? The people behind the brand are those using the product, or customer stories. If it's from a the B2C standpoint, I'll say that maybe not executed perfectly, but I love the idea behind it, was Starbucks and going like, let's tell the story of the farmers and the who we're buying from and how that transaction happened. And so that's more of a supply chain. Telling customers, like the pioneer in this was Red Bull, I think, right? Where they're like, they never talked about their product and what they did. They just talked about their customers and having fun. And you make the assumption that they're drinking Red Bull while they're having fun, but it was creating content. And so, yeah, I think there is a very fine line between all of a sudden it being like the evil marketer is now dragging the developer out of the dark space and shoving them on the billboard to try and get customers. It's not about that. It's about just telling the stories that you think will resonate with, again, those who have like values, and that those stories will resonate with.
Mm-hmm. Lots in that one. Okay, I'm going to allow one Mountain Equipment Co-op question. Only one. And I'm going to give it to you, Anne.
Anyone else?
I'll back you up, Anne.
Okay, so some of you may know that Mountain Equipment Co-op has been bought by a private venture firm and is decommissioning the co-op. So, Anne, can you speak to the risks of marketing your purpose if what's going on underneath isn't following suit? Like, was there a brand purpose disconnect in what was going on? Are there risks in this to avoid or pay attention to? What role should marketing be playing to ensure that the talk aligns with the walk? Because marketing may be alert to the disconnect, and what role do they play? Just a little bit more here. Yeah, what advice can you give us to ensure, what role should marketing play to ensure an organization doesn't lose sight of its purpose?
Yeah.
And by the way, 1 minute on that too, and no fast follows, Peter. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Anne.
Well, I would say that I left over a year ago, so I can't speculate of anything around what's happened this year. So I can just give in terms of context. I think, you know, traditionally at MEC, from a marketing alignment, for instance, with product, we can, you know, in terms of an example of if there was a product that was coming out that had what we thought might have some cultural appropriation issues with another brand, marketing was right in there with product, and we were making decisions together and guiding that. So I don't think, you know, it's not, that goes to the earlier points around across the organization, you need to be aligned and to be working together. I think what you're seeing in the retail industry in general is that there have been closures in retail for the last few years, and this is just escalating within the last year with COVID. And I think social purpose, everything we've been talking about today has been around strengthening. It strengthens your bond with your customers and it strengthens your brand. But at the same time, you can't, there's business fundamentals. When you go into a crisis, you need a strong balance sheet. And so they do need to both work in tandem. It's not necessarily that it's creating conflict within the organization, but it certainly needs to be there in tandem in order for you to get through crises like we've been seeing this year. So, but I think purpose in general helps. It's the glue across the organization so that we're making decisions together to ensure that we're living by our values.
And the important role of marketing to be at that table, even at product tables and at operational tables and other tables, to help bring that perspective, the customer perspective, as a key stakeholder into the work.
Absolutely.
Not only the customer, I guess marketing now has all stakeholders, not just the customer in mind, to be thinking about and bringing that perspective into other conversations in the company and holding the company internally to account. So that's what we're hearing. All right, so we're almost at time. I'm going to ask each of you to provide a final remark. The length of a tweet, which, as you may know, because you're marketers, is about 140 characters. I think it still is that. What's a final takeaway for the audience? Piece of advice or comment you'd like to make as we conclude? I'm going to go Chris, then Peter, then Anne, and the length of a tweet. So, Chris.
Well, this was in my answer. I just added to that answer in the Q&A. But just because it made sense doesn't mean it makes sense. and we can do good and do well at the same time, and we need to harmonize those.
Got it. Peter.
Being purpose-driven can measurably propel your brand, but never forget that your customers and stakeholders ultimately own the brand.
And bring it home.
Yeah. I think ultimately purpose provides the why of why we're here. And purpose marketing helps communicate that why, but from the heart.
So we've got so many takeaways from our discussion today. I'm loving this business to people lens. You don't own your brand, telling the story, and needing to make sure marketing's at the table internally to bring that truth telling to other executives and other leaders in the organization so that there continues to be alignment as the company builds out over time. Well, everybody, please join me in a virtual round of applause. Shout out to this fantastic group of panelists who've really unpacked what the opportunity space is and helped us anticipate some risks as all of us work to create a purpose-driven economy in Canada. And I'll have to say, let marketers lead the way. Why not? At least we'll let the three of you lead the way. I don't know, I'll have to look at all the other marketers out there, but thank you so much, very powerful. If we could, Lorene, just switch to the last slide there to let people know that we have a request for any of you. If you know a business leader interested in how social purpose can benefit your business, please connect up with us and we'll be happy to plug them into one of our programs. And our final slide just lets you all know how you can keep connected with us in the months and years ahead. So enjoy the rest of your day, everybody, and good night to you in Paris. And thank you so much for being on this purpose journey with us, and to our panelists as well. Goodbye.
Everyone.